There are astronauts, and there are ufonauts.
Warning, the following material may not be suitable for all audiences.
Welcome, everyone, to UFOnaut Radio, 9 to 10 every Saturday night, broadcasting live on a rain-soaked evening here at our top-secret location in Portland, KPAM 860. I am your host, Jesse Randolph, and as always, thanks for tuning in tonight to a program that takes you on a truth journey outside the Matrix each week. UFOnaut Radio, what do we do here? We report the latest happenings within ufology, paranormal, and new science communities, examining these subjects with a high level of scrutiny together. With that being said, tonight you're going to want to put the cell on vibrate. Go get your skeptic friend. Go get your brother or your grandpa or whoever says there's nothing to this stuff. Open your mind, call them up before the first break, and say, this is the show you want to listen to tonight. I promise you, while we present the taboo that most are deeply afraid to discuss openly during the work week. Tonight's show, like I said, go grab your skeptic friends. The quality of the messenger is probably the most important component or ingredient when attempting to open minds or change public perceptions when discussing UFOs or any other paranormal subject or new hypothesis. With the subject of UFOs, not only is the quality of the messenger critical, but there is another uphill battle that the researchers and advocates face. Here's what it is in a nutshell. How do you convince the masses about the reality of an issue or a phenomena when they don't want it to be true? And you can say you don't care or you're not afraid, but we know that you are. Would the masses really want to know that we might be very small and much less evolved organisms when compared amongst the galactic community? Would the masses really want to know if another species might have seeded humans on this planet and in essence might be our true creators? Would the people of Earth really want to know that our governments of the world have no real control over their own airspace, and that beings from other worlds come and go as they please, doing things we are totally unaware and confused about? Well, I think not. Modern-day history has told us that most are probably okay and fine with UFOs staying in the movie theaters. However, there are some that do not handle this quite silently. They want to know, which is why we are here. Some of us have a need to know. Some of us demand to know what the government has been obviously afraid to explain to us for years regarding UFOs and the ET presence visiting this Earth. Some of us don't even know that we have this desire and passion, but we do. And that's enough. We have a need to know. My guest tonight, like I said, go get your grandpa, go get your boyfriend, is a top-tier quality messenger. She is the type of investigating journalist that would wide-eye any UFO skeptic with her information and her new book. If they were open enough to reading it, as I've often said, there's plenty of proof, but not many forums to share it. Well, tonight she's got a forum, and we're lucky enough to have her, a member of the next generation of ufology advocates, or as I always say here, the new guard. She has worked for 10 years on a body of work, this book that I will speak to you about tonight, and she will as well, that brings forth information that the mainstream is never told about through the media. She does an amazing job of exploring how the subject of UFOs, how they became taboo, because they are, to discuss in a serious light, and political suicide to mention in the halls of the Beltway. And you know what I'm talking about, politicians. We are privileged to be joined tonight by journalist and author of the most popular book about the reality of the UFO situation in years, Miss Leslie Kean, coming up tonight. And I want to allow Leslie to open your eyes out there, especially for anyone who thinks credibility is an issue with this subject. So tonight, we're going to talk about UFOs, generals, pilots, and government officials going on the record. How does that sit for you on a Saturday night? Leslie Kean, Coming up after the break, and your questions and phone calls, of course. This is UFOnaut Radio, KPAM 860.
9 to 10 every Saturday night. UFOnaut Radio with Jesse Randolph on KPAM 860.
All right, let's get into it. She's on the line. She's here. Leslie Kean is an independent investigative journalist with a background in freelance writing and radio broadcasting. She began covering the UFO subject in 2000 with a feature story in the Boston Globe, followed with additional mainstream stories in 2002. She co-founded the Coalition for Freedom of Information, an independent alliance advocating for greater government openness on information about UFOs and for responsible coverage by the media based on a rational and credible approach. I love the way she words things. She was also a producer for the 2009 independent documentary, I Know What I Saw, of course, James Fox, which we are huge fans of. Leslie Kean, welcome to the show. How are you?
Jesse, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's fantastic. It's fantastic to have you with us. And I want to thank you for staying up tonight nice and late for us, and we're going to give you a decent forum. Let's jump right into it with the time that we do have.
Great.
Now, this book is a game changer, I'm telling you, and I want you to tell everybody why. Tell us why this book, which has taken you years of work in the making, has the potential, in my opinion, and yours, to be such a game changer for the study of UFOs in general.
Okay, well, I think there's a number of reasons that I think make this book really unique, but I think the most important one is the fact that it includes 17 pieces actually written by very high-level people. This is not just me as a reporter saying, oh, General so-and-so said such and such, and I just quote the person, which is what you usually get, or you might get a little soundbite from them if you're watching a documentary or something. But what we have in this book is high-level people that have actually written their own pieces in their own words, just describing their experiences both as witnesses and as official investigators who have worked for governments investigating this phenomenon. And they've infused their accounts with their own emotional reactions, their fears, in situations where they're up in the sky dealing with these things, their thoughts about it, their reflections. So I think, the fact that you're getting directly from these people, hearing directly from them, I think gives this book just sort of this irrefutable power. And among those contributors are 5 generals, a former governor of a state in America, the former governor of Arizona, the former head of Accidents and Investigations Division of the FAA. So, when you read these people, what they're saying to you directly, it's just very different than having somebody tell you and paraphrase or quote them.
Absolutely. These are people in powerful positions, and which brings me to my next question. And we talk so much on this program about the quality of the messenger. It's so vital, especially in this topic, and you word it so well, how the subject has become taboo. It's political suicide to talk about in so many sectors, especially the Beltway. But was it a goal? It seems as though it was a major goal for the book to bring across some really high-level quality messengers.
Absolutely. I mean, that was really a goal. It was to bring forth not only the absolute best messengers, but also the best cases and the best evidence, and to have that evidence being brought by these people. I mean, it's sort of an unbeatable combination. That was really, when I got, this idea of this book actually came out of a press conference that I co-organized with James Fox in 2007.
Yeah.
And we had this panel, you've probably talked about it on the show, this panel of some of these extraordinary people lined up in Washington, and it was very powerful, but, they each had 3 or 4 minutes to talk.
Sure.
And I thought, that just doesn't do it. I mean, yeah, we got a lot of media coverage, but it doesn't have the same effect as actually having a long, detailed, carefully worded piece written by these people where they can just give you a lot more information than they can possibly do in a short amount of time. And we haven't heard from these people before in the kind of detail that they're providing here. So
absolutely. And the problem is, and I've said this many times, and I think you would definitely agree, which is that there's tons of proof, but there aren't many forums to present the proof.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true, and I thought, if a book, and then the second part of the equation for me, and I think this part of the success of this book is getting a really good publisher to take it on.
Yes.
I mean, this is not a self-published book as so many books are. This is Random House, one of the biggest publishers we've got, and they have helped produce a really quality book with great editors and great designers, and they've also have great marketing and publicity people. I've got this team of professionals, and that's really helped a lot to sort of give the book added clout, to get it sort of up there and get it respected by people that are looking at publishers like this.
Well, like I said, it's the combination of everything you just said, but you're not giving yourself enough credit, too.
Well,
so your background, your experience, like I said, you are part of the quality messenger equation, understood? So, for instance, this is pretty cool stuff. I have the book in front of me right now. On the front of the book, you got Michio Kaku doing a quote. At last, a serious and thoughtful book about this controversial subject, and he goes on to explain more. But then the forward, and I wanted to ask you about this. The forward is from John Podesta. Now, this is where we can get into government a little bit. If a guy like John Podesta, who wrote the forward for your book, he did a good job. First of all, how did that come about? And if someone on his political level can't get answers, Leslie, what does that say for the wall of secrecy?
Yeah, well, I mean, the reason we have John, I was able to get him to do this, and I'm, of course, really grateful to him, was because he's been supporting the work I've done for many years on a Freedom of Information Act initiative that is a whole other topic, which I don't really want to get into. It's sort of a sidetrack, but he's very interested in issues around government openness, and so I was involved with Freedom of Information Act, effort that went on for many years, and he was a supporter of that. So I sort of had this relationship with him, and he already respected the work I do and the way I approach this issue. So that's how, when I approached him to do this forward, he was willing to, and he was aware of the other contributors to the book and had a lot of respect for this, and he's curious about UFOs. And, I don't think he's really been beating on doors to get answers, though. I mean, he's an incredibly busy guy. Yes, he's curious about UFOs, but he hasn't been, trying to get answers and feeling that he's been thwarted. I mean, he would like more information to come out, but he's not himself trying to make that happen. He's relying on me and other people to make that happen, but he's willing to support the effort.
Right. He's willing to support the effort, but we've heard rumors, we've heard stories about people like Bill Clinton, former presidents, and others who have tried to access information, sensitive information, and have been absolutely stonewalled, whether it was President Carter who did it, or Bill Clinton, who has been quoted saying there's a government within the government, and supposedly had sent certain people, when he became president, to find out certain pieces of sensitive information that he always wanted answers to. And UFOs was, according to the rumors, on the list, and he was stonewalled as well. Is this something you've heard about? Is it still just a rumor? What's your thoughts?
No, you're absolutely right. He did. He sent Webster Hubble to try to get some more information. He said, I want to find out about two things: who killed JFK, and I want to know about UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't, so you're right. He did not get any information, and I don't know to what extent how deeply he really went, or how hard, Webster Hubble really tried, or where he went to try to get the information. But we do know that Clinton did make that attempt, absolutely, and was not given information.
Well,
so, and you're right. We have heard stories about this happening over with in other administrations as well, and I don't doubt them. I'm sure that these it's not easy to get whatever information is really buried in there. It's not easy for anybody to get access to, including the president.
Well, absolutely, and of course we know that presidents come and go. So whoever is in charge of some of this sensitive information, and I have my own theories about why it might be being kept secret, and I'd love to hear yours later in the program, but they understand that presidents do come and go. I will have noticed a pattern. It seems as though certain presidents kind of come into their administration gung-ho to possibly release more stuff about this, and then either they're briefed or they just change tone on the subject, because like I said, it'd be tough to get Jimmy Carter to sit down to talk about UFOs even nowadays, I would imagine.
Yeah, he's not. Understand that he's not very approachable, and yeah, it seems like what you said is true, that the attempts tend to be made in the beginning of the administration when they first come into office, and then they just get consumed with so many things and so many other things that it just slips away and isn't, they don't think about it again.
Yeah. You know what? I've got someone on the air that wants to ask you a quick question. I think it's very pertinent to what we're talking about right now. We've got Ryan in Seattle on the line. How you doing, Ryan?
Yeah, hi. Leslie, it's been said that many congressmen and senators may not actually know what's going on, that they've been out of the loop. So the question was, had you considered, or has anybody considered, has anybody in Congress, do you think, maybe looked at your book? What I'm saying is that perhaps maybe your book is a good way to sort of inform some congressmen.
It's a great question.
Don't know what's going on. Your book would probably pique their interest, and then they might want to dig a little bit deeper.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, Ryan, I certainly appreciate that question, because actually that was my real purpose for writing this book. I mean, at the deeper level, yes, I want to get the information out, but who do I want to get the information to? Most importantly is just the kind of person you're talking about. The elected officials, you're right, they do not know anything about this subject. It's not like they're privy to any particular information, and they're not particularly concerned about it. And I'm hoping that this book will be a tool that can be actually used in just the way that you said, to approach people who are in a position to change attitudes, to change policy, the people that shape the way things happen in the culture.
Well,
and
Leslie,
I think the book can be used that way, and I have every intention of using it that way.
Leslie, and I want to try to help support this so that it just doesn't become another good book that, like you said, had a good marketing machine behind it and it sold well. It is a catalyst. It is a tool. We need to utilize it. We need to support it. So I guess to back up the question from Ryan, by the way, thank you, Ryan. James Fox, when he was on the program a few weeks ago, was very frustrated with I Know What I Saw to a certain degree, because he had mentioned receiving a letter from Steven Spielberg, which I'm sure you know all about. And it was a letter that he felt he wasn't allowed to share, apparently. It was supposed to be kind of just mano-a-mano to them, the two of them. Have you received any sort of correspondence from anyone in the government or any politician?
Not yet, and I think that I don't expect to right away,
Okay.
and I think that I'm probably going to have to be proactive in terms of getting this to the right people. And I sort of see that as phase two. I mean, right now, the book has been out for about 5-6 weeks only.
Wow.
And I've been working so hard just to get it to where it is now, and then gradually I'm going to be shifting a lot more into dealing with the kinds of people that you're talking about. I mean, these are the really important people, but I think the first step is to build up so much, to build up the book in terms of its credibility. The more powerful, the better the book is received, the better it does. I mean, this is the bottom line. It might sound like a conflict of interest, but this is absolutely the case, that the better the book does, the more power it's going to have as this tool that we're talking about. So the first step is I got to get the book to do well. I got to get it out there,
Sure,
to get it lots of respect, to get it reviewed and covered by the media, which is happening. But, we've been on the New York Times bestseller list for 3 weeks. I don't know if you know that.
I do.
But that's the kind of thing that grabs the attention of the kinds of person that we're talking about. So that has to happen first. And then it's going to shift towards them a little bit more.
Yeah, you know what, Leslie, hang on. We're going to take a break. When we come back, what I want to get into is a report, a study done in France that came across your desk one day that you write about in your book that really changed everything for you in many ways. So we'll be right back with Leslie Kean. This is UFOnaut Radio on KPAM 860.
There are astronauts, and then there are UFOnauts.
You want answers? I want the truth!
Now, back to UFOnaut Radio.
You can't handle the truth!
Jesse Randolph on KPAM 860.
Can you handle the truth? That's definitely a question I want to ask Leslie at some point in this program when we have time, if she believes that the American public or the world can actually handle the truth, or if they want this to be true. Leslie, where we left off, I wanted to ask you about a report that you talk about in your book early on that changed things for you. It was done in France, came across your desk one day, and it changed a lot of things in your head from many ways. Can you tell us about this report?
Yeah, actually, this is the thing that got me interested in UFOs and certainly changed my life in a big way. It was back in 1999, and I received an English translation of this French study that had been undertaken for 3 years by a group of retired French military officials, among them 4 generals, one of them a 4-star. an admiral, and the former head of the space agency in France, and a number of other scientists and engineers and very high-level people who had studied official data on UFOs for 3 years, wrote this 90-page report, and in it, they not only presented some really interesting case information and kind of looked at the defense implications, the national security implications of the phenomenon, but what really got to me as a journalist when I got this report was their conclusion, which stated that they thought the extraterrestrial hypothesis, as they called it, was the most valid and the most rational explanation for these cases that they studied.
Wow.
And I thought that was a really big story at the time, which is, that when you have officials at this level making a statement like that there could be extraterrestrial craft.
Yeah.
That was a big deal.
I thought it was.
Imagine if four American generals had said that.
Yeah, how much press did that? It was called. Can you pronounce for me? It was
the Cometa report.
Cometa. Thank you.
That was the name the acronym that the group gave themselves. And I just said, wow, this is news. I was a journalist working at a public radio station at the time. I'd done a lot of freelance publishing, and I was always looking for interesting stories. And that's when I started to look into this, and then I ended up writing my first story in the spring of 2000 for the Boston Globe, and it was about this French report, basically. I added other material as well, but that's what really the root of this story was that I wrote, and that was the turning point for me. Once that story came out, and I got such a great response and, was so encouraged by the response, that I just decided, well, this is what I want to pursue, and I haven't stopped ever since.
Well, yeah, and so how did you deal with the mock factor, and how do you deal with it right now? Because I've seen you on Colbert. We talked about this offline, and you handle it so well. You seem to be prepared for it, and it doesn't seem to shake you in any way, shape, or form. But you came from very mainstream media. So how do you handle the mock factor?
Yeah, it's been an issue, and I think it was really hard for me in the beginning. I think the main reason I handle it well now is just because I've been doing it for so long, and also because I have so much confidence in this book. There's nothing in the book that makes me at all, insecure or in any way afraid of what could happen in terms of response. But in the beginning, I was really worried about it, and in fact, when I got that Cometa report in the mail, there was a 6-month time period between when I received the report and when the story in the Boston Globe came out, and I didn't want to tell even my close colleagues who I worked with on a daily basis that I was looking into this topic. I was really insecure about the whole taboo element of UFOs.
Sure.
And once the Globe story came out and it was not ridiculed, it gave me more confidence. But it took many years, because you have to know a lot first to feel confident in the material. I had to really feel grounded in the acceptance of this really being the real deal. It just took a lot of study, and just gradually I got more and more used to it. So I don't really have a problem with it now, but I know that it's a big issue in the culture.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, it might be, hopefully it's not the case, and I see you on Nightline one day. But as we both know, that might be a crapshoot. It might be a long shot. Who knows? We can cross our fingers. I'm happy to call anybody over there if you like me to, but I don't think they know me over there.
Yeah, a lot of those shows are so news-oriented that there has to be some kind of UFO event for them to cover it.
Well, absolutely.
They'll cover a sighting or something like that, but a book, not all the shows will sort of gravitate towards having an author on to talk about a book.
Well, not only that, and we talked about when you're on Colbert, obviously his intention is it's a comedy show, so he's going to make light and fun of stuff. But even if you're on a mainstream news program, you write about in the book how UFOs, how they became a taboo subject for professionals and mainstream science. Can you tell us if you've come to any conclusions on how we change that?
Yeah, I just think, I'm hoping that this book is going to change it. I just think we have to keep beating on the wall and I think the key thing is we've got to put out the right kind of information. We can't, there's so many people in the UFO field that just run around with all kinds of crazy information. It's not carefully thought through.
Indeed.
And they'll just jump at any whistleblower type that comes out of the woodwork, and put them out in a press conference or something. There isn't enough discrimination, and I think we have to be just so careful about what information we accept as credible and what we present. And, the media is going to gravitate towards the more sensationalistic stuff. That's what they do. So I think a lot of it is being careful about what we actually put out there, and that's what I'm trying to do in the book, is really sort of change the whole tone and quality of the body of information that's presented.
No, I think a lot of people appreciate that, And a lot of intellectual friends, some of my friends in Silicon Valley especially, will appreciate that when I tell them about this book, and I have told them. But like you said, I have people writing me letters asking my personal opinion about, what do you think about Robert Dean, or what do you think about Clifford Stone, or what do you think about Bob Lazar? And the problem is, like you said, there's a lot of loose ends, there's a lot of credibility issues, there's a lot of bad investigation work, and then there's just a bunch of charlatans in general. So you go to some of these conventions, it's very difficult. People just getting involved in this, I try to steer them towards the most conservative aspects of this subject that I can do, that I can steer them towards. And now I have your book, which does help. So I've steered a few people there. Just read this book and then watch I Know What I Saw. It's a great companion to do both, I think.
I agree with you, and I think steering people, that's the way I look at it too, is you steer people towards the most conservative information. And the interesting thing is that conservative information is really extraordinary.
Absolutely.
You don't need the rest of it.
Oh, it's not dry, folks. By no means is this stuff dry. We're talking about, and I wanted to ask you about this. Did you have any astronauts in the book? I didn't notice.
No, actually not. I mean, I looked into some of it, but there really wasn't anything, that I felt was really strong enough in terms of just all the components of a case, because I tried to have cases that were all, that had so many different components to them. For instance, multiple witnesses, radar, physical traces on the ground, effects on airplanes, just so many components that add up to a full picture. And it just didn't fit in with the sort of the overlay of the book to have an astronaut.
That's interesting, especially with Edgar Mitchell being so popular in the subject.
Right, but he's not. He's really a spokesperson. He sort of talks secondhand about what other people have told him.
Indeed.
He's not somebody who's been really directly involved himself, and so that's sort of the difference. Although I, of course, have tremendous respect for him, and he's also spoken out a lot. And I thought, I'm trying to bring forward some new voices in this book that have had just direct relationships with the phenomenon, whether it be official investigators or witnesses.
Absolutely. So here's something I want you to comment on. My personal theory, this is me talking, is that possibly the government is afraid to tell the public what it knows regarding UFOs because a few things. It undermines their control over their own airspace because they don't have control over it. And also, I think most Americans would be extremely afraid. What are your thoughts about those two statements?
Yeah, I think those are good theories. I personally don't necessarily believe, this is, again, my own opinion, that Americans would be that afraid if the government were just to simply acknowledge that there is a phenomenon that, that's mysterious. For instance, at the O'Hare incident of 2006. As an example, if the government had done an investigation and had just said, here's what the witnesses saw, and we've learned X, Y, and Z about it, and, this disc thing was there, but we can't explain what it is. I don't know if that would really upset a lot of people. And I think that all we're really asking for initially is for the government to just be willing to acknowledge something when it happens and then to investigate it properly. And this is what the thing is, that this has happened in numerous other countries, and those governments have made statements to that effect.
Yeah, and
they
that's
have
really
acknowledged this, and people have not flipped out in the culture and in the society.
And that's a really good point, especially in some of the South American countries, in Brazil and Peru, and obviously France, which I think has been one of the leaders. Let's do this. We have to take a break, but when we come back, what I want to do is talk to you how your life has changed since releasing this book and working with James Fox and what that was like. So hang tight. We'll be right back with Leslie Kean, one of the new guard leaders of ufology. Thank goodness she's here. This is UFOnaut Radio, KPAM 860.
9 to 10 every Saturday night. UFOnaut Radio with Jesse Randolph on KPAM 860.
Oh, yes. Back now with Leslie Kean, coming down to the bottom of the hour. If you've got a phone call for Leslie, I've got about 200 questions for her. But if you have a question, 877-774-5726. If you're local in the Portland area, 503-225-0860. Leslie, welcome back. UFOs, generals, pilots, and government officials go on the record. Let me ask you this. Which one in particular would blow the skeptics' minds that you came across that really had you on the edge of your seat? And how did you find these people?
Gosh, it's so hard to pick just one,
Sure.
But I think that the Belgian UFO wave that opens up the book is really an extraordinary case, and it's presented by a major general who was directly involved in an investigation. I mean, I think that's amazing. I think the Bentwaters case, the Rendlesham Forest incident, is also one of the best cases on record.
Mm-hmm.
There's others, and I mean, the reason I was able to get the people to write these pieces, I think, is because the way I've been covering the subject for 10 years is the way that they're really comfortable with. And some of them I've gotten to know over the years because I've been, going for the best sources I could get in my work. So I've developed relationships with them. Some of them I met for the first time at the press conference I did with James Fox, but they were all really comfortable with sort of the approach that I have, the way I was handling this book, the fact that we weren't making a lot of claims, and just sticking right with the facts. I just feel like, I have enough of a sort of a history of doing this in a certain way that they felt very comfortable with it, and they were all willing to contribute. So.
What about the folks that weren't willing to go on the record? You must have some super secret stuff in your desk there with the lock and key that you're not allowed to bring out in the book. Am I right here, or is there stuff that you're tongue-tied on?
There's some things definitely that I've been told that I'm not allowed to bring out, and people who will not go on the record, which is always, when you can't put it out, the name out there, there's no way that you can. I mean, certainly I'm gonna go with any confidence that people ask me. I mean, I'm gonna keep my confidences, but even some of the things you hear that you where the person isn't saying you can't ever talk about this. It's just that, if there's not enough information to back it up, I'm not going to put it out there.
Sure.
There are also some really interesting things that have come to my attention by people that I really trust that I've just been told, you can't talk about it. Not a whole lot of stuff.
Well, can we just go into those right now? Do you mind?
Yes, right ahead. What did you say? But the stuff in the book is enough. It's fascinating.
It is. It's
intensely powerful. Inside information that's being brought out by these high-level people. So it's not like anybody's being gypped of anything, I don't think. It's not like I've got reams and reams of all the secret stuff and that I know all the secret stuff. It's really not like that.
No, understood. And I'm anxious to see you on a Larry King or a program that will give you the ample amount of time with the regular gang of naysayers, the Shostak. And
Larry King always has to bring those guys in.
Oh, God.
It's unfortunate because it takes up valuable airtime.
I know.
But, that's what they just always feel they have to do that. It's the way the producers run the show.
Well, what drives me crazy, and, I really enjoy Stanton Friedman. I enjoy him as a researcher. I respect him. I think he's in the top tier of people as far as having put in the time and the research, going to the National Archives for years and trying to get the Freedom of Information documents out about certain cases and really doing quality investigative work, I think, instead of dealing in myth. And here's a guy that most of the time when he does get invited, if the deck's not totally stacked, and he can hang with anybody, but these guys usually don't even read his materials. That's what's so crazy about it.
They don't. I mean, the producers will just formulate some questions and hand it to them,
Yeah. So it's like, how Bill Nye, the science guy who plays with, peanut butter and stuff and how to do experiments in making, water vapor for 7-year-olds.
Well, who's that other guy they had on? Oh, Magaha, James Magaha?
Yeah. What rock did this guy crawl out from?
I mean, really. I mean, Bill Nye is a step above that guy, I have to say.
I guess he is, although he's got to lose those ties. And he's got to eat a little bit. I could probably give him a couple
Larry
of pounds.
King. It's just you can't get them away from. You can't stop it.
It's so weird, And then you always have Michael Shermer from Skeptic Magazine, who doesn't even believe that people go to the bathroom. I don't think anymore. He does. I don't know what this guy believes, but it's just no is his favorite word in the world, I guess. But at least read this book. That's what I'm trying to say when I told this audience, and most of my audience are very passionate about the subject. But they often say to me, oh, I got made fun of in a group or at the party. Somebody said, hey, what's the skinny on UFOs? And I say, don't try to paraphrase. Don't try to explain the situation to them. steer them towards something that you would be proud of, such as this particular book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Going on the Record, or this documentary, anything by James Fox, in my opinion. And then let them talk to you after, but don't try to paraphrase 10 years of solid investigating work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the trick is getting people to be willing to read it.
Yes.
And it's an investment, but I think once they start, they will want to keep reading. I hope that's the case. But yeah, I mean, I agree. If you can just get, especially the very skeptical people, I mean, those are the people that I wrote this book for. I really want them to read it.
Indeed.
I'd love to know their thoughts after they're done, but at least they've got to read the book first.
Read this book. Okay, it's a game changer. This is what I'm talking about. This journalist we're talking to, Leslie Kean, she decided when she wrote the book to only put the top quality messengers in it. And that's why I asked about astronauts. I mean, there have been tons of astronaut stories and such, and they didn't even make the cut. So, let's do this. Tell us about working with James Fox a little bit. He's become this unsung hero in ufology for a while now. I Know What I Saw. He did Out of the Blue. He's working in the Gulf now, doing all kinds of neat stuff. He's a great guy. How did you like working with him, and what, if anything, came about from that press conference? It was at the National Press Club. How many years ago?
It was in November of 2007.
Okay, so it wasn't very long ago. Now, this had happened before.
Years on that. It's amazing.
So, yeah, I know. Time flies by. But this has happened before. Okay, Stephen Greer had done this years prior, okay, with a group of gentlemen, and I think that their credibility status, some of them might have been a little, let's just say in a nutshell, I don't think some of them would have made the grade for you guys as far as criteria.
Definitely true.
Is that okay to say?
Absolutely true.
Okay. So then you go ahead and you do something similar with a higher caliber of folks, and especially, and I want to bring this to people's attention here before we run out of time, Fife Symington. Tell us about Fife Symington, and tell this audience who this gentleman is, because I'm sure he has not been on Nightline to expose this.
Right. Now, Fife Symington was a big part of that press conference, and he was the former governor of Arizona. He was governor of Arizona during the Phoenix Lights incident of 1997. And people probably remember him for putting on this ridiculous press conference in the spring of that year, a few months after the incident, where he dressed up his chief of staff as an alien,
that's right,
a Martian, and brought him out in a mask and said, I'm going to bring you the answers to the Phoenix Lights, but just sort of made a joke out of it. I think people might remember that. And this man, actually 10 years later, and this happened with James Fox, when James Fox went to interview him for the movie I Know What I Saw, just expecting the guy to say, oh, well, here's the reason I did that press conference, blah, 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 to just sort of, he didn't expect to get very much, but
sure,
he was curious to hear what the former governor would have to say about it. And, completely as a shock to James, while the camera was rolling, he came out with the acknowledgement that he himself had actually been a witness to the Phoenix Lights. And he started to describe what he had seen, and he said he wanted to make amends to his constituents for what had happened. So this man has had a complete turnaround, and he was the moderator of our press conference in 2007, and it really helped bring a certain level of gravitas to it. He's become a spokesperson for this issue. I'm working closely with him to get changes made in Washington. He's somebody who has been through, as a governor, he's experienced directly how inept the policy is that we have.
Sure.
And he's just a great person to help facilitate change, and he's committed to doing that. So,
well, I'm proud of him for doing it. And not only that, he is a pilot. He's a trained pilot.
Pilot, too,
and
yep.
It's really amazing to watch him speak, because when you watch the video, you can see that he is truly spilling his guts about something that he did a wrong. He did a disservice, and he's coming clean about it. In a couple of weeks, we're having on Paul Hellyer.
Mm-hmm.
Folks, if you're not familiar with it, it was a former defense minister he was for Canada, and I don't know if you had any if you've had any conversations with him at all, Leslie.
No, I actually never have. I certainly know of him. I know what he's been saying, and I know people that have talked to him, but no, I personally have not, actually.
It's what's interesting is finally people are coming forward, not just on deathbed confessionals like some researchers like Don Schmidt and stuff focus on, and not just Roswell, which a lot of people in my generation are kind of sick of hearing about, to be honest with you. But people who have held positions of power, like some of the people that you are bringing forth, Fife Symingtons and Paul Hellier's, they have nothing to gain. They have everything to lose. Yet here they are doing something because I guess they're coming at a crossroads in their lives where they're realizing that the world needs to grow.
Right.
And
when they've had direct experience like Symington has, it changes your life.
Okay, last question, because we're out of time. I got about a minute left. I have to ask you this. I'm still dumbfounded by this part. The end of your book, or not the end, but in some of the interviews I've read or heard about you, you are still a neutral, healthy skeptic regarding UFOs and beings of ET origin visiting this planet. What would it take for Leslie Kean to be convinced 100% after writing this book?
Yeah, I mean, what I use the word is agnostic. Basically, that I'm agnostic about what the UFOs actually are, as are the other people who have contributed to this book. I mean, certainly we all agree that the extraterrestrial hypothesis is, just as the generals in France said 10 years ago, very likely is an explanation for these things. And it's hard to imagine what else they could be, but nonetheless, I don't think we have the kind of absolute proof that we need in order to certainly to convince the status quo.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. I could talk to you forever. Leslie Kean, New Guard member and future of ufology. Good luck with the book. If we can do anything, you let us know, okay?
Thanks, Jesse. Having me on the show was a big help, and I just hope people can spread the book around and get it out there.
We will. This is Jesse Randolph. You've been listening to UFOnaut Radio. We'll be here next Saturday with Chris Moon, who has a gadget, apparently, that can talk to the deceased. We'll see you next Saturday, everybody. And radio broadcasting. She began covering the UFO subject in 2000 with a feature story in the Boston Globe, followed with additional mainstream stories in 2002. She co-founded the Coalition for Freedom of Information, an independent alliance advocating for greater government openness on information about UFOs and for responsible coverage by the media based on a rational and credible approach. I love the way she words things. She was also a producer for the 2009 independent documentary, I Know What I Saw, of course, James Fox, which we are huge fans of. Leslie Kean, welcome to the show. How are you?
Jesse, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's fantastic. It's fantastic to have you with us. And I want to thank you for staying up tonight nice and late for us, and we're going to give you a decent forum. Let's jump right into it with the time that we do have.
Great.
Now, this book is a game changer, I'm telling you, and I want you to tell everybody why. Tell us why this book, which has taken you years of work in the making, has the potential, in my opinion, and yours, to be such a game changer for the study of UFOs in general.
Okay, well, I think there's a number of reasons that I think make this book really unique, but I think the most important one is the fact that it includes
the most important component or ingredient when attempting to open minds or change public perceptions when discussing UFOs or any other paranormal subject or new hypothesis. With the subject of UFOs, not only is the quality of the messenger critical, but there is another uphill battle that the researchers and advocates face. Here's what it is in a nutshell. How do you convince the masses about the reality of an issue or a phenomena when they don't want it to be true? And you can say you don't care or you're not afraid, but we know that you are. Would the masses really want to know that we might be very small and much less evolved organisms when compared amongst the galactic community? Would the masses really want to know if another species might have seeded humans on this planet and in essence might be our true creators? Would the people of Earth really want to know that our governments of the world have no real control over their own airspace and that beings from other worlds come and go as they please, doing things we are totally unaware and confused about? Well, I think not. Modern-day history has told us that most are probably okay and fine with UFOs staying in the movie theaters. However, there are some that do not handle this quite silently. They want to know, which is why we are here. Some of us have a need to know. Some of us demand to know what the government has been obviously afraid to explain to us for years regarding UFOs and the ET presence visiting this earth. Some of us don't even know that we have this desire and passion, but we do. And that's enough. We have a need to know. My guest tonight, like I said, go get your grandpa, go get your boyfriend, is a top-tier quality messenger. She is the type of investigating journalist that would wide-eye any UFO skeptic with her information and her new book. If they were open enough to reading it, as I've often said, there's plenty of proof, but not many forums to share it. Well, tonight she's got a forum, and we're lucky enough to have her, a member of the next generation of ufology advocates, or as I always say here, the new guard. She has worked for 10 years on a body of work, this book that I will speak to you about tonight, and she will as well, that brings forth information that the mainstream is never told about through the media. She does an amazing job of exploring how the subject of UFOs, how they became taboo, because they are, to discuss in a serious light, and political suicide to mention in the halls of the Beltway. And you know what I'm talking about, politicians. We are privileged to be joined tonight by journalist and author of the most popular book about the reality of the UFO situation in years, Miss Leslie Kean, coming up tonight. And I want to allow Leslie to open your eyes out there, especially for anyone who thinks credibility is an issue with this subject. So tonight, we're going to talk about UFOs, generals, pilots, and government officials going on the record. How does that sit for you on a Saturday night? Leslie Kean, coming up after the break, and your questions and phone calls, of course. This is UFOnaut Radio, KPAM 860.
9 to 10 every Saturday night. UFOnaut Radio with Jesse Randolph on KPAM 860.
All right, let's get into it. She's on the line. She's here. Leslie Kean is an independent investigative journalist with a background in freelance writing.
There are astronauts, and there are UFOnauts.
Warning. The following material may not be suitable for all audiences.
Welcome, everyone, to UFOnaut Radio, 9 to 10 every Saturday night. Broadcasting live on a rain-soaked evening here at our top-secret location in Portland, KPAM 860. I am your host, Jesse Randolph, and as always, thanks for tuning in tonight to a program that takes you on a truth journey outside the matrix each week. UFOnaut Radio, what do we do here? We report the latest happenings within ufology, paranormal, and new science communities, examining these subjects with a high level of scrutiny together. With that being said, tonight you're going to want to put the cell on vibrate. Go get your skeptic friend. Go get your brother or your grandpa or whoever says there's nothing to this stuff. Open your mind, call them up before the first break and say, this is the show you want to listen to tonight. I promise you, while we present the taboo that most are deeply afraid to discuss openly during the work week. Tonight's show, like I said, go grab your skeptic friends. The quality of the messenger is probably